the thing to say to yourself, the mantra is you train for the worst and hope for the best. So if you train in rough water, and I tend to do it, I've got a local beach 6 miles away, which is absolutely superb and even has a line of swim buoys. And I can go through it and it's smacking me in the face, and I go when it's rough and it's an easterly, and I'll swim there and I'll get used to it. And you alter your stroke so that you know you're going to go deeper, you bury your head, you adjust yourself to doing things like, well, with this wave coming in this direction, I've got to do at least 6 strokes before I'm going to get a trough to breathe in, that sort of thing. So that's training yourself in rough water and not doing all your training on a beautiful sunny day when it's flat. And you do tend to find that when you set off on a marathon swim, they won't actually start you on a swim in a force 5. They won't. They just won't. It tends to be for a solo, you're sort of force 2, force 3, expect 4. For relays, they say force 3 to 4, expect 5. But if something blows up during your swim and you're already swimming, you tend to adjust gradually so that you can cope with what happens to the water, to the surface of the water, and you just find you keep going. And that's the thing about in your head, which is however tough it gets out there, is always, I can just swim to the next feed. And each time that happens, you're just swimming to the next feed. Or I can always do another hour. I can always do another stroke. I had a friend say that to me on a swim once, where it was dark. We were setting off for a 10K. And we had to stand, I've got a photograph of this, Kim. We had to stand on the causeway, strangely enough, at St. Michael's Mount, while the water was coming up to our knees. We had to wait while the tide rose high enough for us to go in over the rocks and go round the mount to do the 10K. And he saw my face and he said to me, you can always do another stroke. And that stuck in my head as a mantra, which then became, if things were getting really tough on a swim, you can always do another hour or swim to the next feed. And on one of the toughest events I ever did, which was swim, it was a mile on the hour, every hour for 24 hours. So that one, I said, right, I can always do one more mile. And each time I did one more, I found a reason to do another one and a reason to do another one. And all of these things are, when you're on a massive swim, it's going to take you between 10 and 20 hours. All you can do is find a reason for the next hour. I've got friends who say, this hour is for this relative or this friend. The next hour is for this relative or this friend. And they have a reason in their head to get to the next waypoint. And also, there's also this thing, it sounds weird, but it's just imposter syndrome. Do one swim and think, no, that's a fluke. That's definitely a fluke. I can't do this again. Well, we'll try another one and see if it was a fluke. And you finish the second one and you think, no, I'm not a patch on these people, so I'll do another one. So I keep on booking swims in hope that one day I'll actually believe I'm good enough. And with that comes a lot of personal pride and stubbornness, is that I am not going to get out. I've started this. People are watching. I'm going to get to the end. It's a very odd reason to want to finish something, but that's just pride. I don't want to get out. I did get out once. I got out in 2023, but not because I couldn't do the swim. I got out of the swim after 25 minutes because I just didn't want to be there. That's the only time I've ever got out of one. It's really strange. And it wasn't even a long swim. It was 8 miles.
Tell me about how that felt to do that.
To get out. At the time, it was a massive relief. I said to my friend who was kayaking, do you know something, Jane? I just don't want to be in here today. The sky is black. The sea is rough. I've punched enough jellyfish. I don't want to be in here. And she said, what? You never get out. I said, well, today I'm going to. And I called the safety boat over and I got in and I went back to shore. And my kayaker came in and we went out for lunch. And it wasn't until I got home that I felt, I can't believe I did that. I failed. And I felt like that for about 24 hours till a friend of mine contacted me. Have you heard of Nick Adams? He was the president of the Channel Swimming and Piloting Federation. And I think he's swum the channel now 19 times. And he'd never failed until 2023, which funnily enough was the same year I got out of that swim. And it was about a week before I did that he actually got out of the channel for the first time ever. And when I failed, he sent me a message and saying, I know how you feel. It's shit. He said, but the one thing it does that he had found out is it took the pressure off. He said, so what happened? Did the world fall apart because we got out? No, it didn't. That pressure of having a 100% record that we both had disappeared. And I just think to myself now, I don't feel like it on the day I'm going to get out, but I haven't actually got out since. I went back last year, and I did another swim and I finished it. And the one I got out of, I've rebooked for July, and I'm going to finish it this time. I've had my failure. I didn't die. The world didn't end. And a few days after I got over feeling as though I was a complete failure, and I just laughed about it and thought, on that day, I knew I wasn't trained. I'd moved house. I'd spent months painting and putting things up and repairing things. I hadn't trained. I got in on that day knowing I hadn't trained. And I almost used this as an excuse to get out. So once I actually looked at what had happened, later on, when I was less upset about it, less ashamed of myself for getting out after 25 minutes, I looked at it and I thought, you were never going to finish a swim that summer because you hadn't trained for anything. Just accept it. And what it did do, what it taught me is don't go into something if you're not going to train for it. And last year, I trained quite hard to do Ullswater, which is quite cold. It starts at 13 degrees, it goes up to 16, and it has a dog leg in the middle, after which it tends to get quite rough. I didn't enjoy it, but I finished it. And I bought a map of Ullswater, which is on the wall just inside the front door. And every time I look at it, it reminds me, if you want to do something, train for it. So the one I failed on, I know I didn't train for it. And I know I'm training properly for the ones I'm doing this summer. And I've got no excuse to get out. There's always a good reason to stay in.
Is that phrase that you just said, I have got no excuse to get out, is that something you actually say to yourself?
I do, in the swim. I also get angry with myself in the swim.
Okay.
So if I'm starting to whinge inside my head and have a bit of a meltdown and think I don't need to do this today, I actually get angry with myself. And I sometimes almost do say out loud, oh, for God's sake, woman, get on with it. And I get angry and it gives me a bit of a push. And I tend to do that in every swim. And one more thing I do in every swim, I have a bit of a shout and a meltdown at one feed. And Steve always feeds me on these swims, and he lets me have my meltdown and a whinge and a whine about either conditions or some twinge in my shoulder or whatever. And then he says, yes, that's fine, now carry on. He doesn't listen at all. But he knows I have to have a bit of it's almost like being a pressure cooker. You've just got to let off the steam once and then get on with it. So they're all coping mechanisms.
But they're yours. They're particular to you, right? Like you've just found the right combination for you. And help me understand how you kind of worked out that recipe, if you're conscious of it, I'm guessing things were just intuitive often on the day. Yeah, but if you think about it intentionally, how do you think you came up with the strategy or the recipe that you work with?
I think they developed over a number of swims as coping strategies. So in the channel, well, it wasn't my first big one. My first big one was the year before that, which was double Windermere. And the strategy then was you can always do another hour, because that was the first one that came into my head. Having gone one way, I didn't think I had the energy to come back. And it was my pilot, Colin Hill. Colin's done loads of things worldwide since then. He said to me, let's go to the next feed. So once I heard that, once I'd finished one way, we went to the next feed, and then he said, well done, let's go to the next feed. So that's where that particular strategy came from. And I've used that in every other swim since then. And in the channel, I found I had a bit of a whinge. One shoulder was going and I couldn't make my left arm go. So I lifted my head and I had a bit of a whine and a whinge and a yell. And that actually helped. So as circumstances in each swim are different, you'll find there'll be something maybe that will get to you, will get to your head and start making you think about, there's the ladder, I'm going to get out. So you go through the strategies that you've learned from each individual swim. And there will be one that will help you carry on. And if there isn't, you develop one. And that's also where what excuse have I got to get out? What reason have I got to get out? Because you know that if you do get out, a minute later, you'll regret it. As soon as you get out, if there's no reason, if you're not ill, you just don't want to be there mentally, you have to tell yourself there isn't a good reason to stop. It's different if you've got hypothermia or you're feeling ill. That's a reason. But what's in here isn't. That's where all the other strategies come in. You know if something wrong. You know if it's time to give in. If you're chilled to the bone and you're slurring your words and your crew can't get you to answer a question, you know you're talking serious hypothermia here, and by that time they should get you out anyway. Yeah. You know if you've been stung by so many jellyfish. Even in the channel, we've had people, when I've been observing, where there was, I think 2015, there were shoals and shoals of Pelagia noctiluca, those nasty little mauve stingers, and they scar. And there were so many in the channel. We had people who were literally stung thousands of times. You know, swimmers who said, it's not why I came here, I'm getting out now. And we often had to take them to hospital because of the toxins. So things like that are beyond your control. Yeah. What's in your head is in your control. You can control it. And you can control it by having a number of strategies to tamp down that feeling in your head that says, I've had enough. So you develop your own strategies over a series of swims, like I did, according to what it was that made you want to get out, whether it's the weather, whether you've got a sore shoulder, whether you're just fed up. You've got to have somewhere to go in your head that tells you, no, the door to getting out has been slammed shut. You have to carry on. This is the reason why. So it's about training your mind to get through the really hard points. Because it's not your body, for the most part, that tells you to get out in distance swimming. It's your mind. And like you said, your friend is training for it physically. And if she can cope with the cold and she's a good swimmer and she's got that speed, there's no reason at all why she can't do the North Channel. It's just her head. She's got to be able to put all the negative thoughts in a box, lock that door and throw away the key.
So it's interesting. I'm curious. You've got to find, you know, this is the thing I started with, is like, what's the value of speaking to other people? Because I think it's very individual. But nevertheless, I think you have to have almost like a filter. You know what works for you. Listen for that in other people. Take what's useful, leave the rest, is sort of how I see it. And I'm interested, like, when you use language, like you put it in a box and you throw away the key, suggests to me that you're a visual person, like you use visualization. So when you go, you've got to go somewhere in your head. Like, could you talk into the extent to which you, say, for instance, use visualization and how, and pre, during, and after? Because I think that's the after is something people don't talk about quite maybe as much.
I don't tend to use visualization afterwards.
Yeah.
I don't use it very much before, apart from in my head thinking, wouldn't it be lovely to be on that beach at the end knowing I've done it? And just having that's almost just a still in my head. Okay. It's not seeing myself finish a swim. It's during a swim I start to imagine myself finishing it. and imagine myself at the end being able to smile and say, yes, I've done it. I do think about it beforehand, but it's just that it's almost the picture of having done it. It's not the actual video in my head of the event itself, if that makes any sense. The actual movement, the almost preempting the film of me finishing something, I tend to do during the swim. And the other thing I visualize during the swim is being warm and back on the boat afterwards. And I'm not allowed to tell myself, you can't have that unless you finish the swim. So that bit of visualization is the pleasure after the type 2 fun.
Yeah, so it's the reward. Like you. So
yeah.
And when you visualize being warm and back on the boat, is that actually warming you up in the water?
No, it spurs me on.
Yeah,
it spurs me on to think, if I get on with this, I don't procrastinate, I move, I make sure every stroke counts, then the sooner I will get to that situation where I can say to myself, yes, you've done it, and you're all wrapped up and you can smile and the boat is going back to base. Okay, it's just like that.
The other thing is, do you in any way tap into like the physiology? So you go, I notice some tension here, or focusing on a particular part or of either like tension or ease, or just your heart starts beating faster. Do you? Yeah. So is there anything you intentionally do around that? The physiology.
I intentionally focus on every stroke. Okay. To make sure that it's sufficient. I intentionally focus on, make sure that when you're breathing to the right, you're still at full stretch on your left arm. And thinking about things like that actually gives you something to focus on while you're swimming. I tend not to try and think about the fact that my left hip flexor gets very painful after about 2 hours and I have to keep stretching it out. Because in that sort of situation, I would stop and ask for some meds anyway. Because that is what happens to it after about 2 hours. And sometimes it makes training really hard. But I try not to focus on anything physiologically that appears to be going wrong, because that's not good for my mental state when I'm swimming. I will focus on the positive physiologically, in that every one of these strokes is getting me closer. Make sure that you concentrate on keeping your stroke effective.
What about?
So I find focusing on something that's going wrong actually knocks me for six then, and affects my stroke and affects what's going on in my head. So I like to think physically, no, you're feeling strong, the strokes are good, keep them going. And so physiologically, I will encourage myself.
So just by focusing on where you're doing well, and really, and do you like visualize it, or you just focus on the sensations?
I just focus on the sensation.
Interesting. Okay. That it sounds to me like the focusing on the stroke and the sort of mantras that go with it keeps your technique on point, keeps your rhythm, and it keeps the efficiency and the quality of your swim as best as it possibly can be.
Yeah, sometimes I count the strokes. I'll go up to 100 and I'll start again.
Yeah.
And sometimes if things are going well, but I am getting bored, and you can get bored on these really, really long swims, I'll look at the name. I remember doing, I've done three swims in Jersey with Lionheart. And so you're looking at the boat and the name Lionheart on the side of the boat. And the first time I did a swim with Lionheart, I was thinking of all the countries I could, beginning with L and then I and then O. But there's only Oman. So when you get to O, you've only got one country. And so this is really annoying. And sometimes you can think for ages and think, no, there really isn't another country. And by the time you've thought of that, you've done another quarter of an hour.
Okay,
so things like that. Playing word games and anagrams with the boat name. And sometimes I'll just do that.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, and so there's some spontaneous things that just get presented to you. So it suggests. So do you feel, or I don't know if there's consistency. Do you feel nervous before every swim?
Yes, very.
Okay. How
Sometimes
do you know?
It can take a couple of hours for my heart rate to calm down and for me to stop feeling really shaky. The first couple of hours it takes me to get into it and actually stop saying, "What am I doing here? I don't want to do another one today." My first 2 hours are always terrible. Okay. And it's the same in training. First 2 hours, I want to get out. But I always have. And once those 2 are over, I just start to calm down. And it's a different mode. You go into marathon swimmer mode and you get your head down and you get on with it. And sometimes you can find you've zoned out and the time is going, you don't even notice how many hours you've been in. And suddenly you'll find someone's waving a bottle from the boat. Think, is that a whole hour? You just haven't noticed it. So there doesn't seem to be, in any of my swims, a particular pattern that's there every time. Because your preparation, no matter how good it is, it's going to be different every year. There will be different things that snag you. Like at the moment, I've got a sore shoulder and I'm having treatment on it. So I haven't been in for a week. So there's always something else to focus on. And there's always something slightly different about a swim. You can be doing really well and then suddenly find you banged into an old piece of carpet or something like that. And these things happen all the time. Or you've got a plastic bag wrapped around one arm. Or something happens on the boat that suddenly takes your attention away and you're wondering, what are they doing up there? And you stop concentrating on what you're meant to be concentrating on and you lose your focus a little bit and you have to put yourself back into it. But at the time when this is going on, the time of the swim seems to take forever while you're doing it. And then when you get to the end, it's like that. And people say it's like childbirth in that it's awful while it's going on and then you forget it at the end. It is a bit like that. It is definitely type 2 fun in that while you're doing it, it's really, really hard. And when you finish it, you've enjoyed it. You probably haven't really enjoyed it. I've got plenty of friends who say, I hated every moment of that, but I'm glad I finished it. And Kevin Murphy, who's swum the channel 34 times, once said to me, I didn't like doing it. I liked having done it. And in a lot of ways, if I'm honest, that's what it's like. I do it as a challenge to myself. And I like the fact of having done the swims and being able to look at my swim CV. And I like looking back at the photographs and remembering it and thinking, I got through that tough bit. But quite often, while I'm in there, it is a long day at the office. It was something a marathon swimmer told me, and at the time he's told me this, held the record for the arch to arc, the fastest arch to arc, and he said, it's a day at the office. You can't just get up from your desk and go home.
Mm-hmm. Because it sort of strips out all the hype of it as well, as you say it. You know, it's just something you got to get through. You can get through a day at the office. You can get through this. You know.
Yeah. It's just one day. Some people say it's just one day.
Yeah. And it's you know, you started talking about when you started talking about Kevin. I didn't like doing it. I loved having done it, and that felt true for you as well.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I wanted to ask you the difference between goals. You know, to me, like, you know, swimming, Molokai, whatever, any one of these things is a goal, which is different to a purpose. So goals being achievable things, and a purpose or a core motivation being something that's more about not a destination, but about meaning.
Yes.
And
mine,
yeah,
I have goals because I've always been goal driven. If I don't have something to aim for, I find I'm drifting, and I don't feel as though I have a purpose. And I especially felt it since retiring from teaching and then retiring from coaching. I've got to give myself a purpose. Otherwise, I will just drift. I'll drift along in the camper van, or I'll just go walking and I won't have anything to aim for. So I have to have something to aim for.
So so are you always therefore setting yourself, whether it be a swim, or is it just swims, or does it translate into other areas of your life where you literally will just set things, and so that there feels like something that you're working towards all the time?
On my phone, I have a list of things I want to do for the house, and I'll tick them off. Or a list of what I want to do in a certain month, or, just things I want to achieve by this time. And it's not always swimming.
Yes.
Steve once said to me, after our daughter got married for the first time in 2012, he said, now you've done all of that, the next thing you wanted to do was, you have something else on your list. The next thing you wanted to do was buy a van and have it converted to a camper. He said, Zoe's only just got married. I said, but that's the next thing on my list. That's I've always been like that. That was before I ever did any marathon swims. Well, I'd done nothing beyond a 10K then. It was like my daughter's wedding was done with military precision, right down to the little boxes I bought for the wedding favours and the little cars I bought to stick on the top of them. I did everything with military precision. And I can't help that. That's what I've been like.
You don't need to help it. It's using these things that drive you to your benefit. Right? You didn't start really doing what I've got your Zurich marathons from the relay that you did in 2010 as your first sort of endurance swim that's there.
By 2010, I did a 10K down the Dart, and I did that relay. But apart from that, I'd barely done any. I did a swim trick in 2009. But that was that relay of Zurich. That was the first thing that I'd really done with two friends. And then 2011, I did a channel relay. I was still doing 10K down the Dart. So until 2012, when I did my first 6-hour swim, I hadn't done anything beyond 3 hours.
Yeah.
So that was when 2012, at my first 6-hour swim, I was 51.
Yeah. So what convinced you or sparked you to think, I want to or can do this?
Well, I was coaching at a swimming club in Basingstoke, and being a member of the Amateur Swimming Association teachers, I was looking on their website for something about kids I was teaching, and there was a little box at the corner of the page that said swim a mile in Windermere. And I thought, outside, that sounds interesting. So I clicked on this box and said, it's the first year of the Great North Swim, and it was run by Colin Hill, who was my pilot when I did double Windermere 5 years after that. And I said, Steve, come and look at this. A mile in Windermere. He said, do you want to try it? Well, let's get you an entry-level wetsuit. Because I've never been in open water at all. Not like people, just only at the beach, stuff like that, and when you're a kid. So I bought an entry-level wetsuit, and my daughter came and leaned over my shoulder. She was home from university, and she said, I want to do it. So we bought her an entry-level wetsuit, and then we toddled to Windermere, and it took me 34 minutes to do that mile. And I remember the learning curve, getting in, thinking, there's a buoy there, I've got to swim to it. Putting my head down, swimming, and thinking, where's the buoy? And then looking up and finding the buoy was somewhere over there, and everyone was swimming in that direction. And you learn with every stroke, you think, right, okay, this isn't a pool, I've got no black line. So I've got to actually keep looking to see I'm going in the right direction. So the first half of it took me ages because I'd been in the wrong direction. And then there was an Australian exit, and you had to get back in. And it was 15 degrees, and my toes were so cold, I could barely feel where I was walking. And the swim back was so much better than the first half. So I did this mile, and I thought, I really loved that. And I've got this picture somewhere on Facebook of this huge grin as I got out. And I thought, I'm hooked, open water. And a friend said, you've got a wetsuit. I'm taking you to the lake next week. And it started from there. And I did 3K, and then I did the Ironman distance, 3.8, and then it just built until I read about Dark 10K in 2010. I thought, well, I'll give that a go. And I got last place on that. 200 people did it that first year. Now they'd have 800 people over 2 days and 800 the next day. It's too big for me. I tend to drop out of events once they get big. But it was like that. And seeing someone do Zurich, who had 2 friends who said, why don't we go and do it as a relay? And once we'd done it as a relay, I said, I'm going to come back and do this as a solo one day. It was the same with the channel.
So what is that in you that say, after you've done Zurich as a relay?
It's a niggle. It's a niggle that says, if I can do that, can I do a bit more? And then a bit more. And then it gets slightly out of hand. And so you go from 3.8K to a 5K to a 10K, and then wonder, well, if I can swim for 3 hours, can I swim for longer than that? And it's one of those things, it's like the goals. Again, give myself a goal of an extra hour or an extra hour or an extra hour, and then build it up. And then I was going to swim Windermere, and because that was going to take me about 7 hours. I thought, well, I've already swum 6. And then I was in Dover and I swam back-to-back 6s and then another 6 that week. And I thought, now if I go and swim Windermere now, that's only going to take me about an extra hour. So where's the challenge in that? I'll make it a 2-way. See if I can go from 6 hours to 14 plus. So it's just, and I didn't know I was going to finish it. That was the first one. So that was the challenge. It was push and see how far you can get. And I said to my mentor, I'm not sure I can do 2 ways. And she said, well, look at it this way. Do 1 way. That's an achievement. And then turn around and see how far you can get. And she said, it'll be good feeding practice for the channel, which I had booked the following year. So once I got halfway back, there was no way I was not going to finish it. So Kevin Murphy once said to us, well, we tended to do training in Dover, 7 hours one day, 6 hours the next. He said, well, that's 13 hours. If you've done 13 hours in the channel, unless there's something wrong, there's no way you're going to give up. That's the way he looked at it.
What do you feel most proud of in yourself that you have got out of that your swims have given you, your achievements, your swim achievements have given you? What makes you most proud?
Oh, heavens. That's a really difficult question. Because most of the time, I get out of a swim and I think I'm never booking another one again. And then within half an hour, I've changed my mind. I think if I had to pick one swim that I was proudest of, it's probably Catalina, because the fears of wildlife and swimming, I think it was about 9 hours in the pitch black, combined with being in a foreign country and totally outside my experience, and having a head current all the way, so it took me about 4 hours longer than it should. I think that's probably the one I'm most proud of. I think it was lots of bits outside my experience at once and finishing it. That's probably it.
And if there was something like a thought that went through your mind after that reflected what you were proud of, can you think, does something come to mind?
I think the reason I did it actually was because of a guy with multiple sclerosis who had attempted the channel a week earlier. But because of his multiple sclerosis, he actually ran out of energy. He couldn't finish it. So the reason I actually did it, with all of the things that I was worried about, was that he didn't finish it. So I wrote his name on my hand and swam it for him. So That's, I think I was proud that I finished it for him.
Amazing. Now you throw that in right at the end. You wrote the guy's name. Did you know this person?
No, I'd never met him. Or when I swam the channel, I also wrote a name on my hand. And it was a friend's daughter who had an incurable brain tumor. She was 22. And I wrote her name on my hand when I swam the English Channel.
Mm.
It's just a question of taking people with you when they can't do it as well. It's another reason to keep going.
Mm.
I've done that a few times.
Mm. Beautiful. Thank you so much.
It's an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, I hope you've enjoyed just reflecting.
I have. You've given me a lot to think about, Kim, and you have made me think, made me look for reasons for things that I had just taken